When my father told me to sit down, the entire room obeyed. 200 officers froze, waiting for the Admiral's next command. But his words were aimed at me. "Sit down, Emily. You're a nobody." The laughter that followed didn't echo long, but it stayed inside me for years. That day, something in me broke quietly, cleanly, like glass under pressure. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just sat there, wondering how a man who led armies could look at his own daughter and see less than nothing. He thought humiliation would keep me small. He had no idea that those 4 words, "You're a nobody," would become the reason the world would one day know the name Ghost 13. The conference room at the Pentagon was colder than it had any right to be. The air carried the sharp scent of burnt coffee, waxed floors, and steel from the rows of metals glinting under fluorescent lights. I sat in the last row, posture perfect, a stack of tactical reports steady in my hands. No one looked my way, except for the man standing at the center of the room, the one whose approval I'd stopped chasing years ago. Admiral Raymond Norton didn't need to demand attention. He owned it. Every officer in that room carried themselves like satellites orbiting his gravity. When he spoke, the noise of pens and papers stilled. And when I raised my voice, quietly, precisely, about the signal frequency error on the current transmission plan, he turned toward me, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Sit down, Emily." The words weren't loud, but they sliced through the oxygen. Even the clock seemed to hesitate between ticks. I sat back down, spine locked, pulse steady, face unreadable. Across the table, he smiled, polished, public. The same smile he'd worn on the White House lawn. My notes lay untouched in front of him. The line I'd underlined twice, signal pathway reversal, prevent fatal interference, meant nothing now. Someone behind me exhaled, a soft sound of pity that burned worse than anger. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. I stared at the glowing web of frequencies on the screen, each pulse beating in rhythm like a heart refusing to die. And right there, amid the hum of machines and unspoken contempt, one thought crystallized inside me. If he needed me invisible, I'd learn how to disappear so completely that one day, he'd no longer recognize what he created. 10 years before that meeting room, the Norton house in Virginia glowed like a shrine to success. My mother, Evelyn, moved through the dining room, arranging silverware as if generals might inspect it. The chandelier threw light on the framed medals along the wall, each one proof of my father's triumphs. He sat at the head of the table in full uniform, posture straight, expression carved from pride. Across from me sat Luke, his golden boy, whose flight jacket still hung on the back of his chair, though he hadn't touched a cockpit in years. I waited for the right moment, pulse quick under the table. When I finally said I'd been accepted into the Air Force officer program, he didn't even look up from carving his roast. Clerical or medical, he asked. "Combat operations," I said, barely above a whisper. He laughed, a sound that filled the room and emptied me out at the same time. The laughter wasn't surprise. It was certainty. "You? You don't have the blood for combat." Mother tried to smooth it over with a brittle smile. "Let's not ruin dinner." Luke cleared his throat and stared at his plate. The meat on my fork tasted like dust. When I stood to leave, his voice followed me down the hall. "Don't embarrass me, Emily. Know your lane." Outside, the night air was sharp. I leaned on the railing, the smell of burning wood drifting from a neighbor's chimney. Somewhere above the tree line, a jet streaked through the darkness, its red navigation light blinking against the black. I watched it until my eyes blurred. One day, I promised, I'd fly higher than the reach of that house, higher than the man who could only see limits. That red light faded into the clouds, but it stayed inside me, a pulse of color I carried for years, proof of everything he said I couldn't be. 3 years later, I learned what it meant to have your name erased while you were still alive. The NATO Defense Symposium had invited me to present my research on autonomous drone coordination, months of sleepless nights distilled into a single presentation. My uniform was pressed, my speech rehearsed, my notes perfect. That morning, a clerk handed me a revised program. My name was missing. In its place was his, Colonel Aaron Beckett, a SEAL officer I'd once assisted. Caught up to me outside the auditorium, he pressed the paper into my hand, voice low. "It's your father. Said it'd look better if he handled the briefing. I didn't speak. I walked inside. On stage, my father stood before the same projection I'd built, presenting my diagrams as his own. He called the model a revolutionary flight path innovation from my department. Cameras flashed. Laughter rippled politely. He ended with a smile for the reporters. I'm proud my daughter helps me organize the data behind this project. Applause followed. I smiled too, the kind that fools everyone except the person wearing it. Inside, I heard nothing but the roar of takeoff, that same wind from years ago, building pressure in my ears. That night, I clipped the newspaper photo and glued it into my notebook. Underneath, I wrote in small, steady letters, "He's the voice, I'm the echo. But one day, echoes will outlast voices." Then I closed the book, locked it away, and started counting the days until the sound of my own would be loud enough to drown him out. The night before Operation Tempest, the control room in Nevada buzzed with the low hum of machinery and the restless spin of ceiling fans. Red lights flickered over the radar board, painting every face in shades of blood and shadow. My name was listed as Lead Tactical Advisor, the highest position a major could hold. For the first time, the flight path on that glowing map was mine to command. At 1:17 a.m., a new order flashed on my terminal. Effective immediately. Major Norton reassigned to Observation Unit. The signature at the bottom froze me in place. Admiral Raymond Norton. The call came seconds later. His voice was steel, steady, stripped of anything human. It's a hostile zone. I won't risk your name on a mission you can't control. I stared at the monitor, pulse ticking behind my jaw. My reply came softer than I intended. It's not my name you're protecting, Admiral. 3 days later, the mission went live. The feed flickered, grainy desert terrain spread across the monitors, drone alpha circling above target. When the signal dropped, panic crackled through the line. 20 soldiers trapped, seconds from exposure. The rule was simple. Observe, never interfere. But instinct burned hotter than fear. I opened a hidden channel I'd coded months earlier, keyed in an override, and redirected the drone manually through a back frequency no one else even knew existed. The unit survived. Every man returned home. The next morning, Washington lit up with headlines. Decisive leadership of Admiral Raymond Norton saves U.S. forces. I watched him on screen, shaking hands with the president, smiling like he'd just won a game he didn't play. He stole my mission and called it leadership. By midnight, an official reprimand hit my inbox. Unauthorized action. Subject under internal review. Recommendation, reassignment. I didn't cry. I opened the window and let the desert wind cut through the silence. Fine. If they wanted me quiet, I'd become silence itself. A week later, Colonel Aaron Beckett appeared in the office where I was boxing up my things. He had been on the ground during Tempest, the voice I'd saved through static and distance. He set a sealed envelope stamped with the CIA crest on my desk. They're calling it the Talon Program, he said. Black-level intel. No names, only call signs. They asked for you. Inside, one sheet of paper waited, 4 lines that would rewrite everything I was. Classified. Talon Division, status. Recruitment initiated clearance level. TSSCI L5. Designation, pending. Code name to be assigned. Why me? I asked. Because someone up there read your file and said, she does the job, even when no one's watching. I looked around that tiny office. Every plaque on the wall, every framed commendation carried my father's name, none of them mine. The decision wasn't difficult. I signed. A week later, I arrived at a base hidden in the Nevada desert. No signage, no uniforms, just wind, heat, and silence. The instructor handed me a metal tag and said, "From now on, you're what we call a ghost. You exist only where clearance allows, nowhere else." The tag caught the light as he placed it around my neck. The number etched on it was simple. 13. Why 13? I asked. Unlucky for some, he said, grinning. Lucky for you, I thought. Bad luck for him, for my father. That night, for the first time in my life, I slept without the sound of his voice in my head. No orders, no laughter, no shadow hanging over me. Emily Norton was gone. And in her place, Ghost 13 was born, 7 months hidden inside Talon Division had taught me how to breathe without being seen. When I returned to Washington for a short debrief, I planned to stay invisible, sign the papers, fade away, and return to the desert. But invisibility doesn't work when someone drags you back into the light. My mother's message was short. It's your father's charity gala. Just come for one night. One night. That was the lie I told myself. The ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition. Waiters glided between tables, and the laughter of men who'd never been afraid of silence filled the air. I wore my formal uniform, every ribbon aligned except one, the only medal that actually belonged to me. The band played soft jazz, the same song that used to echo through our house in Virginia when I still believed my father's approval was something worth chasing. He spotted me instantly. The crowd parted as he approached, smile wide, arm heavy across my shoulders. This is my daughter, Emily, brilliant mind, but she's happier behind a desk than in the field. Polite laughter circled the room. A senator raised a glass. Didn't she work on Tempest? My father didn't miss a beat. She helped organize the files. I gave the orders. The words struck deeper than they should have. My throat burned, but I kept my face still, the same mask he'd taught me to wear. I set my glass down and caught sight of the CIA director across the room, the man who'd signed my Talon clearance. He met my eyes, gave one subtle nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was an order. As the band shifted into Fly Me to the Moon, the sound wrapped around me like a memory I didn't want. The same melody had once drowned out my humiliation at his dinner table. Tonight, it marked the end of pretending. I walked out as Colonel Beckett passed by, murmuring just loud enough for me to hear. Tomorrow, Nevada. I didn't look back. I never would again. Nevada's desert glared like molten glass under the sun. Inside Talon's underground bunker, everything was precise. No names, no ranks, no pass. Only call signs. Ghost 13, online. We were launching Operation Falcon's Dusk, a rescue mission in North Africa. I coordinated the satellite link, adjusted frequencies, and guided the SEAL team on the ground. Every second mattered. Then an alert blinked red across my monitor. Override request. Admiral Raymond Norton. My chest tightened. He was trying to access a file that didn't officially exist. Beckett's voice came through my headset. He's trying to reach you. He traced your clearance trail. I steadied my breathing. He won't find me. Ghosts leave no trail. The mission continued. I shifted to manual control, fired a drone strike in the final seconds, and cleared the corridor for extraction. The team made it out alive. When the aircraft lifted off, Beckett's voice returned, calm, proud. Mission complete. They owe you their lives. Ghost. Sunlight hit the metal tag at my throat, the engraved number 13 flashing back at me like defiance. Hours later, a secure message appeared on my screen. Admiral Raymond Norton, under investigation for unauthorized clearance breach. He had violated the Espionage Act trying to uncover me. I didn't smile. Power always collapses when it forgets its limits. Outside, the wind roared over the sand, and for the first time, I pitied him. The man who built walls to keep me small, and now found himself locked outside of mine. The summons came at dawn, marked urgent. By noon, I was standing inside the MacDill Command Hall, a sterile, fluorescent cage that smelled of metal and cold authority. Every seat was filled, the CIA director, the Secretary of Defense, every high-ranking officer in the room that had once belonged entirely to my father's control. He stood at the center, speaking with the same certainty that once silenced me. His voice carried through the room. Discipline is dying in this country. People think they can bypass command. He had no idea the person he condemned was the one who had saved 20 soldiers 3 nights earlier. Colonel Beckett entered quietly, his expression unreadable, and handed a sealed envelope to the CIA director. The room shifted, tension settling like dust. Sir, per request, the asset is in this room. My father's head lifted, eyes narrowing. We have no such asset. Everyone here reports to me. The CIA director didn't blink, then let the asset identify. I rose, calm, clear. Ghost 13. Talon Division, clearance level 5. Silence expanded until it hurt. Every gaze swung toward me, then to him. The glass of water in his hand slipped, shattering against the tile. Her clearance outranks yours. Admiral. The color drained from his face. I met his eyes. Not with triumph, but with release. I had never wanted to humiliate him, only for him to finally see me. I gathered my file, saluted properly. Permission to leave, sir. The director nodded. As I turned for the door, I heard his voice break through the silence behind me. Emily, wait. I looked back once. You don't have the clearance, Admiral. The door closed. Outside, the rotors of a helicopter thundered to life, wind tearing through my hair. For the first time, the sound didn't feel like chaos. It sounded like freedom. 2 months later, the story hit every major network. Admiral Raymond Norton, under investigation for data breach and unauthorized clearance attempt. The man once feared by half of Washington had become someone people avoided in hallways. The silence that followed was louder than his reputation. My mother called one evening, her voice softer than I remembered. He's not angry anymore, just quieter. A week after that, a message arrived on my phone. Coffee. Arlington, if you'll allow it. I went. The cafe was small, warm, smelling of burnt wood and roasted beans. A soft folk song played in the background. He was already there, no uniform, no medals, just an old man with trembling hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold. When he spoke, his voice rasped against the quiet. I just wanted to keep you safe. I looked at him and answered, calm, steady. No. You wanted to keep me small. He lowered his gaze. The way people do when they finally see the wreckage they built. The silence between us felt almost clean. I don't need you to be proud of me, I said. I just need you to respect me. For a moment, nothing moved but the spoon tapping gently against the cup. Then he nodded. You earned it. I smiled, not out of victory, but because it was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. We sat there like two people stripped of titles, no ranks left to hide behind. When I stood to leave, he murmured, they took my clearance. Feels strange, being on the outside. I turned back, met his eyes, and said quietly, welcome to where I've lived my whole life. He laughed, and I did too. A tired, human sound. No forgiveness, no apology, just understanding. And that was enough. 10 years later, the Nevada sun burned gold across the airfield, the light catching on rows of flags that rippled against the desert wind. I stood on the platform in full dress uniform, facing 200 soldiers whose silence carried more weight than applause ever could. The announcer called my name, the new rank echoing through the speakers. Lieutenant Colonel Emily Norton. I stepped forward and spoke into the microphone, the heat pressing against my skin. Some of us were told we were too small, too quiet, too invisible. But sometimes, ghosts build the future because they don't wait for permission to exist. The crowd didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. It wasn't a moment of triumph, it was recognition, long overdue. Colonel Beckett, now retired, approached with the new insignia in his shaking hands. His voice carried warmth that age hadn't dimmed. You were never a ghost to us. When he pinned the silver on my shoulder, I caught sight of the first row. My father sat there, hair white, posture humble, a simple suit replacing the armor of his rank. For the first time, his smile wasn't polished, it was human. After the ceremony, he walked toward me, slower now, softer. You wear it better than I ever did. I held his gaze, the desert light reflecting in his eyes. You finally said something true. He nodded once, no speeches, no apologies, just peace. As I left the platform, the sound of F-35s split the sky above, the same red light blinking that I'd watched so many years ago. I tilted my face toward the sun, felt the heat and the wind, and thought, he gave me his name, but I rewrote what it means. I was never a nobody. I was Ghost 13, and I was Emily Norton.